One of the things I love about resin is its ability to help you use what you otherwise couldn't use. In this case it was scrap timber. Offcuts of red gum, cast in some solid cast 606 epoxy resin and then turned on the lathe. This one here is a lump of, a whole lot of pieces of red mallee burl. Once again, cast into this mould or this green plastic bowl, then turned as I would any normal timber bowl. This is the project that I wanted to show you a few things about and go through the process. I got ready for pouring a whole lot of scrap pieces of, in this case it's blackwood. Now because I don't want to waste a whole lot of resin, what I've done is with this is I've made this timber plug. So this is just out of a piece of pine. I've put it on the lathe and that plug fits into there nicely, giving me the right amount of distance all the way around. Now the other thing it is going to do is when this resin and scrap wood comes out of the mould, it's going to give me a way of actually attaching that onto the lathe using the screw hole. I'll show you that a bit later on. So what I'm ready to do now is to pour the resin into there. In other videos you can see how I've mixed up the resin, and you can also see how I've actually poured the resin. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a pour here, but not too much. So I'm just putting my gloves on to do that pour. I've got some resin ready to go here, and we're going to do a pour. Remember, we're going to pour just slowly from the one spot, lifting the container high to help burst the bubbles, any bubbles that might have been created in the mixing of the resin. Now one thing that you might find is this whole mixture actually starts to float to the surface, so before I go too much further I am going to take down this scrap piece of wood. So I'm just going to put some masking tape over the top of that piece of scrap pine, and that was going to just simply help keep that piece of pine in place, and that's going to prevent that pine, that scrap piece of wood, from floating as the resin fills up the mould. And I'm going to continue pouring the resin in. Now this has already been released out of the bowl, but what I did do was I used this palette knife to help me release it. And palette knives are really good because they are not sharp, they've got no, in fact, sharp areas. They're quite thin and they're also very flexible. So by slotting it down the side here, like so, I can get in around there. The flexible blade helps me get it around the curve of the bowl, release it. It soon releases quite easily and will then just fall out like so. And there it is. The issue is, how do I get this onto the lathe? Now, because I've got that hole there already that can go on there, it's easy enough to do. I can screw that onto there like so. I'll get my tool rest in place and I'm going to turn the back off. Now, this is already round, so you might be wondering why I'm going to turn it. Well, I'm going to give it a bit of shape, a different shape to this, but what I also want to do is actually cut through some of this timber so that the timber is exposed. The timber is raw on the side as well. I also need to turn a little recess on the foot so that I can turn the whole thing around and get the inside out. Safety, normally I would have a face mask on, normally I'd have a respirator on, because I suppose what you don't want to do is breathe the dust of the resin or the wood. Now, the resin is inert, and I suppose the resin dust is just as bad for you as the wood dust, so any dust that you breathe in is not particularly good for you, so do protect yourself from the dust. Also, I normally would wear a face mask, but because of we're videoing, I'm needing just to wear these safety glasses. So I'm going to start by shaping the back. You can see that what's happening initially is I'm taking resin off. A lot of resin is coming off initially, and I know that because it's coming off in these big strands. And they can become a bit of a nuisance when they wrap around the spindle. I'm finding that this is by far the best technique to use. Either shear scraping like this, or like so, is by far the best technique to get a good finish when cutting resin and wood. If you're getting, as I've said before, if you're getting shavings off, things are going right. It's the same when you're turning solid timber. Turn that off, let's see how that looks. Happy with that, very happy with that. Now I've finished turning the outside shape of this bowl, and all I've got to do is sand it before I flip it around and do the turning on the inside. I tend to use these inertia sanders quite a lot, but you can hand sand it or use another power sander. Any sanding technique that you normally might use with wood can be used on this. Resin is going to sand just like wood. Lathe on. With the inertia sander, I tend to sand quite quickly, so I've got the lathe going at about 1500 RPM. Now, normally I would, as I've said before, I prefer to be wearing a respirator, at least a dust mask. I'm not at the moment because of the filming, but understand that. I'm effectively going to be sanding this bowl just the same way I would a wooden bowl, a solid wooden bowl. Now, I started the sanding with 120 grit. I've then gone 180, 240, 320, and I'm finishing now off with 500. At this point, once I've sanded to 500 grit, I will then spray it with the lacquer that I use, which is a nitrocellulose lacquer, and that brings it up beautifully straight away. Here's another technique you can use. U-Butte's Triple E Ultra Shine is a cutting agent. So if I were to grab a rag, get a dab of this Triple E on there, and all I need to do, I'll just get that out of the way. All I need to do is initially wipe this on, and you can already see how well this comes up. Suddenly you can see right into that resin. Now this Triple E is a cutting agent, as I've mentioned, and the longer you hold it on the wood, or in this case the resin and wood, the finer the cutting compound gets and the better it sands. So I'm going to now turn the lathe on. I can slow it down a little bit, I don't need to have it spinning so quickly, and I can apply a bit of pressure. And as I said, the more I hold this rag on in the one spot, so I'm not moving the rag around, the more I use it, the finer the compound or the cutting compound gets. It gets broken down after a lot of revolutions, and therefore it effectively sands finer and finer and finer. There's one area here that I haven't paid much attention to, and that is right in this recess. In fact, I've done no sanding on that recess. I'll just see how it comes out with just a bit of this Triple E on there. Now I've been buffing this with the Triple E, or rubbing the Triple E into it for, I suppose, about 3 or 4 minutes now. And I can turn the lathe off, and there we have it. We can see right into that bowl now. It's as if it's all those pieces of wood have been cast in glass. So I've got a different chuck, a smaller chuck on the lathe now. I've got my recess, my bowl's going to be turned around, and I can expand those jaws into that recess. Bring the tool rest up nice and close, spin by hand, we can start turning that. Now this inside bit is a timber plug, it's radiata pine, nice and soft. I can get stuck into that nice and quickly with a bowl gouge, and my cameraman might cop it here. Okay, right down the bottom I've hit resin, so I just need to take a bit more wood off the side. cutting right on the join there of the resin and wood. So now I've got all of that timber away. And that'll do us for the time being. Everything's looking nice. That'll sand up beautifully very, very quickly. Now what we can also use is an angle drill like so to sand. I would suggest that you don't go too fast. Don't go too fast with the lathe speed or the drill speed. So that was 320, all I need is some 400. I've got some 400 here. Go back to my triple E now. And already you can see that, see right through this bolt. And now the idea is to just rub and rub and rub. Stop the lathe, and here's my bowl. And I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to take that off like so, and there it is. And let's have a look at it. If we hold it up to the light like so, you notice we can actually see right through. Such as the quality of the resin, the clear resin. It's as if all those pieces of wood have been cast in glass.